Nora. We always blame everything on my 2-year-old. You guys can talk amongst yourselves for just 30 more seconds. Nora wasn't here. Yeah. How about honky tonk? There we go. How's everybody doing this morning? Good, good. Well, welcome. You are welcome to stand and join in with us as we sing. When darkness tries to roll over my bones, when sorrow comes to steal the joy I own, when brokenness and pain is all I know, I won't be shaken, no, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Shame no longer has a place to hide. I am not a captive to the lies. I'm not afraid to leave my past behind. No, I won't be shaken, I won't be shaken. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name, power in your name. There's power that can break off every chain. There's power that can empty out a grave. There's resurrection power that can save. There's power in your name, power in your name. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. My fear doesn't stand a chance when I stand in your love. Amen. Would you give the Lord a hand clap of praise this morning? Amen. You just take a moment to, wave to your neighbor. Tell them you're happy to see him this morning.
You come by
believe you're my portion. I believe you're more than enough for me. Jesus, you're all I need. More than enough for me. Jesus, you're all I need. You're my healer. You say that this morning? He is our healer. You unravel me with a melody. You surround me with a song of deliverance from my enemies till all my fears are gone. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears are drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I can stand and sing. I am a child of God. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God.
This morning, and I'm screaming this morning that I'm no longer a slave to fear. I'm no longer the slave of shame, of guilt. I'm a child of yours. I've been redeemed by your son's blood. And I don't want to ever get over that. I don't want to ever get over the fact that one day I'll be reunited with you. And the following that I do through the times that scare me and the times that just confuse me and the times that I just don't know. And even through the times that I just plain disobey. I'm still a child of yours. Lord, as we continue to worship this morning, as we open up your word, Let us just remember that. Let's never lose sight of that. That we don't have to be a slave to fear or a slave to guilt or a slave to whatever we constantly just wake up to and can't just get away from. That you've broken those shackles off of us. Thank you for the gift of your Son, and thank you for an opportunity to worship this morning. And I ask this in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen. You may be seated. Real quick, one thing before the kids head to Kids Village this morning. Next Sunday evening, we have a kids paint party. So if you would like to come to a paint party, kids, through I think 5th grade, kindergarten through 5th grade. I think they're painting narwhals. Is that right, Nicole? Some narwhals. That's those weird creatures with the horns that you wouldn't believe exist, but they do. And so kids, if you want to do that, and also kids, you can go back to your room. So Bella, you and Balin, you guys go back here. Or if you want to stay, you can stay. It's all right. I would say Tiffany's probably way more interesting than I am, all right? Also, before you leave today, I'll remind you at the end, I told you that since we didn't meet for Mother's Day or Father's Day, we have some gifts for you. So we have 2 styles of shirts over there in the hallway, and they go in order left to right. I don't know why I did it that way. So you've got small, medium, large, extra large, double X, and for anybody who would like a triple X, there's triple X's there. There's 2 different styles. I don't know if I've got enough of the ones with the arrows on it, but you're welcome to take one in your size, or if you want to take 2 in your size. Happy Mother's Day and Happy Father's Day in August, right? I'm really fascinated by alligators. Is anybody else in here fascinated by alligators? Jake is, because me and Jake have spent many a time looking for alligators in the wild, not in Carlisle, all right? We've not just been walking around in Carlisle saying, hey, let's look for alligators. And me and Jake are thoroughly convinced that they're not really real. So like the alligators that you see is somebody's pet that they brought from a different country, because we can never find alligators like out in the wild. And then people will come back from Florida and be like, I saw alligators everywhere. And me and Jake's like, no, that's just somebody's pet, right? But I love alligators, right? I just something about them, but it's not that I love them and fascinated with them. I'm scared to death of them. And this is why they're just powerful. I mean, you look at them and they just look mean, right? I mean, there's some people in our lives too, when you look at them, they just look like, I don't want to mess with that guy, right? You don't want to mess with that person, right? So alligators are an animal where you look at them and you're just like, I don't want no part of that. I don't want no part of that, right? I want no part of an alligator that's got teeth and they like drag you under and put you under like stuff so your meat can rot so they can actually eat it. It's weird and it's crazy. And what's really crazy is they run 11 miles an hour on land. So like unless you're faster than 11 miles an hour, they're going to get you in land. But if you get in the water to get away from them, they swim like 25 miles an hour. There's nowhere to hide from an alligator, right? I mean, like if a bear chases you, I'm going to jump in the water because the water's going to slow them down. Or whatever, a cat they don't like, right? Cats, not a cat. Come on, right? Like a bobcat, right? Not a cat, right? Maybe a cat. But there's just really nothing to hide from, and it's probably my biggest fear. It's probably running into a live alligator. I think that's why I like to go look for them and just like get face to face and then turn around and run. But because I've learned a strategy. Nicole knows the strategy. If you see one in the wild and you're on land, you have to run as fast as you can, but you've got to cut and bob and weave. You might be saying, what are you saying? They can run fast straight, but they can't turn that big body. So make sure that you look like Barry Sanders or whoever it is. But it's probably my biggest fear. And as we try to let go of these costly things that we've talked about the last few weeks, on these hill journeys, we need to realize the hardest and most costly thing that we can hang on to is fear. And this is why. Fear is what makes us hang on to these things in the first place. Right? The fear of losing something, the fear of losing the pride, and the fear of losing your identity to things, the fear of losing your control of stuff. One of my favorite authors, Craig Lonsborough, in his book called Flecks of Gold on a Stone Path, it's exactly what the title talks about, just finding those flecks of gold in the everyday ordinary. He writes about the loss in our life, and that he shares it isn't the fact of losing something that we fear. It's the pain that comes from the loss itself that brings on the fear. We don't fear what we'll lose. We fear the pain that comes with it. And this is why fear is so costly. It causes us to fight for the wrong things. So as we continue in Luke 21, we'll be in verse 20. Jesus begins again to talk a little bit about the end times, right? And this, before I start reading these, this is split into two end times, right? So this section of Scripture is split into the end times of Jerusalem, so like AD 70, and then like the end times, like, so for us. So verse 20 says this, "But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you know it is in desolation, has come near. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are in the city depart. And let not those who are out in the country enter it. For these are the days of vengeance, to fulfill all that is written. Alas, for women who are pregnant, and for those who are nursing infants in those days. For there will be great distress upon the earth, and wrath against this people. They will fall by the edge of the sword, and be led captive among the nations. And Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles is fulfilled." That's just a fancy way of saying you're going to be ruled by Gentiles until the Gentiles are no longer. All right, so verse 25, this is the second part. This is like the part we look for, right? So verse 25, "And there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations and perplexity, because of the roarings of the sea and the waves. People fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of heaven will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory." An underlined verse, if you're reading a Bible, if you got a Bible out, or if you've got a phone out, highlight this verse. "Now when these things begin to take place, straighten up. Raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near." So here's Jesus sharing again about some of the things that were going to come. The destruction of the temple wasn't the only thing that was going to happen to Jerusalem. We talked a little bit about the destruction of the temple. And it wasn't the only thing that was going to happen to Jerusalem. The date of this destruction, right, was AD 70 that Jesus is talking about in this text, right? So what happened was, not only did Rome come in to destroy the temple, they came in to kill all the Israelites that were in Jerusalem that day. They were going to kill them all. Slaughter every one of them, right? So he said, you need to flee to the mountains. And here's the funny thing. Not the funny thing. I guess funny thing. But the followers of Jesus actually remember these words from Jesus. And they literally ran to the mountains, and their lives were saved because they ran from Rome. Or they ran from Rome. That was taking over Jerusalem. So they ran to the mountains in AD 70. But the devout Jews felt like this is the time that the Messiah will come and save us. And they stayed in Jerusalem, and guess what happened? They were the ones that Jesus is talking about. They missed the point that the Messiah had already come, right? And so they thought, hey, we're going to stay because if the Messiah is going to come now, he's coming now. We're getting wiped out by Rome. And they were all wiped out, right? And then Jesus starts talking a little bit about this Gentiles, the control of Gentiles, and until the end of Gentiles. It wasn't until 1948 that Israel was recognized as a nation again. So you're talking almost 2,000 years that they were wiped out and the Gentiles ruled. But they still kind of rule it now, because if you think about where the temple is in Jerusalem, if you go there and you start thinking about where that temple is, the temple isn't on the mountain. What's on the mountain? Right? The mosque. So the Gentiles still kind of rule it, right? And then 1968, we all know that they declared that Israel was a nation and Jerusalem's the capital. So 2,000 years, right? And so these Jewish people and the Israelites exactly happened what Jesus told them was going to happen. And they probably lived in fear, and they probably still live in fear. I mean, I watch the news and I turn it on, and you see what's happening in the Middle East and all that kind of stuff. And so verse 27 and verse 28 really shows us what to do in these fearful times, because we live in fearful times. Right? So the two questions as we start is, what can we look to fight the fear of the day? What can we look to fight the fear of the day? And the second question is simply this: how should we respond with the fear in our life? And so to answer that first question, we need to look to being redeemed, right? So me and Nicole will get ourselves, we'll get each other some gift cards for Valentine's Day. A couple of years ago, I got our gift card to a spa at Austin Landing, and I believe that gift card still hasn't been used. That is correct. This Valentine's Day, Nicole, I don't know if it has to do with my fear of alligators or anything, she got me a gift card to go do one of those relaxation float tanks. And you might say, well, what's that got to do with alligators? Because if I'm floating in water, automatically I start thinking about alligators. Like, what would happen if an alligator comes in? If I'm in the beach, like saltwater, what would happen if an alligator come after me, right? But no, I got a gift card to go sit in that relaxation, right? We give things to each other so we can have the gift of relaxation, right? Not just because I'm thoroughly convinced that the moment I shut my door in our bedroom, because we've always slept with our door open in our bedroom, because we have the craziest cat in the world, that if I shut the door, she goes nuts all night long. It's like she's got to be a part of our life, right? So we've always slept, and I'm thoroughly convinced our kids can't handle it. If the moment, Brody just threw his hands up. At least you're listening, bub. Right? So the moment my door shuts, right? The moment I shut the door, our kids are like, boom, what's going on? It could be like 2 a.m. What's going on? What's going on in Mom and Dad's room? Is there a party going on in there? What's going on, right? And so relaxation for me and Nicole, we want to give the gift of, but here's the problem. We give the gift of relaxation, but it doesn't work if we don't redeem them. Right? I mean, I'm sitting on a year almost of having this flotation tank, which I'm still kind of weird what's going to happen in there. Nicole's like, hey, you can go into this pod. And I'm like, pod, what? You know? But Nicole's been sitting on like 2 years of like going to the spa up there to get her nails and all that stuff done. But it doesn't work until we redeem them. And on these hill journeys, it's all about being redeemed. Right? But all too often we let fear cripple us because we don't live in that redemption. We don't redeem what we've been given. We don't turn it in what we've been given. So we'll let fear cripple us because the fullness of it is coming later. Here's the problem. So Jesus is coming later. That's the full coming of redemption. That's like that gift card getting cashed in. And by the way, just a little small rabbit. Businesses like you to take gift cards because like 70% of them never get cashed in, so you're just giving them money, which is good because I'm still going to buy them for people's birthday, right? Because it's easier to go and say, hey, I'm going to go buy a gift card for you, but that's okay. But just like our redemption, we won't use the things that we have because we won't cash in that redemption because the fullness of it's coming later. And so what happens is we always get caught up in the now. We lose sight of the things that God gives us. We lose sight of the gift that Jesus gave us on the cross. His death, burial, and resurrections allows us to be on these hill journeys. And if you don't follow him, I would love to say you're on a hill journey, but that hill journey doesn't start until you follow Jesus. But it's more than just that starting point. It's more than just the exit onto the highway of a life of following Jesus. It allows us to be redeemed from the brokenness of the world. I can never grasp the fact of that it's not just my life is broken, not just my relationship with God was broken back in the Garden of Eden. Like creation itself broke. Earthquakes. That's why Jesus always talking about like the seas will rage and all this kind of stuff. It was just broke. And that fullness is coming one day. So when you look at the word redeemed and the definition of redeemed, it says this: it's to recover something pledged or mortgaged by payment or other satisfaction. So all that brokenness, all that sin, all that stuff that we did, Jesus became the payment to recover the brokenness. And that's why we're redeemed. That's why Jesus says, hey, redemption is coming. One day you will see me coming on the clouds, and redemption will be full. And so here's the picture that Jesus is giving the Israelites. Here's the picture that Jesus is giving the disciples. Hey, listen, it's going to be a struggle. But remember that you are redeemed. Remember that the price was paid for. Remember that even though the world is still broken, that you still have someone that fixed you. And keep your eyes on that redemption. So Romans 5, verses 18 through 19 says this: Therefore, as one trespass led to the condemnation of all men, so one act of righteousness leads to justification and life for all men. For as by the one man's disobedience that many were made sinners, so by one man's obedience that many will be made into righteousness. And that's talking about Adam's disobedience, Jesus' obedience. And now you're righteous. And this is how we fight the fear of the day, knowing that as a follower, redemption has been paid for. The brokenness is, yes, it hurts. Yes, it causes guilt. Yes, it causes shame. Yes, it causes all this stuff, right? But the brokenness isn't who you are, because you're redeemed. Christ redeemed that. But you got to understand, it's different than just walking up the fear and slapping it in the face. If I was to see an alligator in the wild, number one, I would FaceTime Jake. I'd be like, I saw it, Jake. It's real. Number two, I'm scared of it, so I'm not going to go slap it across the face. Right? This isn't how we fight the fear of the day. Right? This isn't how we fight the fear of the day, is just to go head bore into whatever scares us, right? And slap it around a little bit. Right? We fight it knowing that fear doesn't engulf us. Right? And so when the brokenness of the world overwhelms me, I can look at the redemption that gives me peace. So when you start feeling overwhelmed, and when you start feeling like you just want to stop, just remember that he said, the one that never breaks a promise, said he will become riding on the clouds and the world will be made new. Now, one of the scariest things in the Bible is a lot of people like to talk about Revelation, right? You know, it talks about weird stuff, you know, flying dragons, all this kind of stuff, right? And I always say, I don't know, like if I was back in those times and I was put in a sleep and I was told what's going to happen at the end of the world, I don't know how I would describe a fighter jet other than a flying dragon with missiles coming out of it. You know what I mean? So maybe it was some imagery. Maybe he's like, I don't know what this is. Or maybe it's really dragons going to come down and just wipe everybody out. Right? I don't know. It scares us to read those things. But you got to understand, when Revelation talks about Jesus and his foot touched the mount, it's over. That's the redemption that Jesus promises is in our fear. That no matter what happens at the end of the book, when he comes down and riding on the clouds, it's over. And redemption and the brokenness and all that is made new. And he'll make it not just new, he'll make it the way it was intended to be. Unending relationship with God the Creator. Unending. Walking hand in hand. The Bible even says in Revelation that lions will lay with lambs. Like all the animals will get along with each other. So at that point, I can pet an alligator. right? You guys thought, you didn't think I wasn't going to come back to that, right? Right? So when this fear starts taking us over, right? We need to look at that, and we need to remember that promise. Not that it's going to give us some extra boost and some adrenaline so we can go fight the fear, but it gives you peace, right? So here's what the early Christians would do when they saw Rome taking over things. Every evening they would go out and they would look for his coming. There's stories in early manuscripts that talk about the early believers that every night after they would eat meals together and they would worship together, they would just go stand and look at the sky and wait for Jesus to come back. And that's great imagery, and it makes them sound like they were these great Christians. But really all they were doing was they were trying to find their peace in the chaos. Please come. Please come. I'm scared to death. And then it's like, not that it was magic, but it was like they'd be filled up with enough peace for the next day. And then they would go out and look again, right? We not only have physically drifted from that mindset, but we've drifted spiritually from that expectant spirit. I shouldn't say we. Not only have I drifted physically from going outside and looking. Now granted, there was a beautiful sky Thursday here. I'm sure there was a beautiful sky where the Tuckers were all week on the beach, and but there was just, it was just like pinks and purples and oranges, and I was like, man. And then there's times I see the sun coming out of a cloud and I'm like, there's Jesus, right? But I'm going to tell you, more times than not, I don't even look up. I just focus on everything that's around me. And so when Peter, you guys remember the story where Peter was walking on the water, where Jesus was coming walking, and Peter's like, I'm scared to death, God. I'm scared to death, Jesus. And Jesus said, hey, come on out. Whoa, right? But all I know is Peter knew that if he's going to stay in the boat, he's going to die. He just wanted to be with Jesus, right? So he got out of that boat, and he started walking, on the water. And then he starts walking, and the Bible is very distinct in the imagery, not even the imagery, the words that are saying, Peter looks down and he sees the rushing waves, and he begins to sink. And that's the picture. That's the picture of what when you start focusing on all this around here is when you begin to sink. Yes, you can go to work. Yes, you can do all those things. But when your intention is, and this all starts taking over, the life and the craziness and the news, when this all takes over, you begin to sink. Metaphorically, you sink into a hole. But we need to have that spirit-filled expectancy of Jesus coming again. Number one, because it brings us peace, because we know he's bringing to make it whole again. Number two is it's an urgency that we live by. It's an urgency that we live by, right? Once again, Craig D. Lawrenceboro says this way, God poses no threat to me other than keeping me from being my own greatest threat. Let me read that again for you real quick. God poses no threat to me other than keeping me from being my own greatest threat. Now, that's a quote I need this morning. Because if I was to look at my life, and I was to tell you the biggest threat to my life would probably be me. Because all I think about all the time is what could go wrong. If I do this, what could go wrong? If I say this, what could go wrong? If I take a day where I don't do anything, then here's what happens in my crazy brain. I think about all the things that I should have done so I don't have to do them tomorrow. Anybody else like that? Anybody else probably thinking right now what you got to do tomorrow? I'd say most of us are, right? Most of us are probably thinking, I've got to do this tomorrow. I've got to do that tomorrow. I've got to do this. And here's what following Jesus does. It protects you from your greatest enemy, and that's you. Because who's leading your life at that point? The Creator. And this is what redemption brings. Redemption brings this. It keeps me from being my biggest it keeps me from my biggest threat on this journey, me. And when we realize that we may be the biggest threat on this journey to ourselves, we'll respond to fear in a different way. And so how should we respond to the fear? It's just a simple response. My wife I love my wife. But when my wife gets scared, I wrote this sermon. You guys know I love my wife, number one. I just like to tell you that because she can hear it, and we got it on film. And I already had my sermon done. It was put up. I try not to look at it too much because here's a little trick. If you ever want to preach, if you look at it every day, you will change it every day. So I try to put it up once it's done, right? So Friday, Nicole's getting up ready for school. We let our dog out. By the way, the dog is Nicole's favorite mammal in the house. Just so you guys know, that's her favorite mammal. And this is why. Like Simon's out there and he's making some noise, doing all this kind of stuff. And Nicole's like, oh my gosh. She sounds like my daughter who gets caught up a little bit in her drama. Simon, no, Simon, you're going. Simon had dug up a mole. And we've had a little problem with some moles, like some people in this area have, some moles. And so he dug up a mole, and I'll go out there, and Nicole is like at the door. And Simon, like, I'm glad he caught it where he did, because like it was getting ready to go up under the deck, and it would just kind of ruin everything, right? So Nicole is at the door going, Simon, right? And she's just frozen. Like, Simon, I'm like, it's a mole, Nicole. She goes, he's going to eat it. I'm like, probably, if we don't get it. I mean, he's a dog. She goes, it's going to hurt him. I'm like, and then she goes, it might kill him. I'm like, he doesn't even really have claws, Nicole. It's weird. It's like, so I had to take care of the mole. I'm not going to tell you how I did that for the animal lovers in the house or in the building this morning, right? But I had to take care of the mole and dispose of the mole. And then, like, she was still frozen. She goes, is he going to live? I'm like, who? Simon. I was like, Simon's good. I thought she was going to talk about the mole, and I was like, sorry, babe, I had to kill the mole. I'm sorry, right? But so see, that's what fear does to us, right? Fear just freezes us. Matter of fact, the fear response starts in a region of the brain called, and I'm going to try to say this correctly, amygdala, I think. Amygdala. Thanks, Matt. Right? All right. So the fear response starts in that part of our brain, right? And then it leads to a bodily change that prepares us to be more efficient in danger. So it becomes hyper alert, our brain. We're hyper alert. Right? It's like Batman, right? Whew. Batman must have just lived in fear. Your pupils dilate. The bronchi, they dilate as well, and your breathing accelerates. And by the way, for the football players in the room or anybody that's ever played, that's why we run, is to train your body to do those things and to be able to think better that way, right? And your heart rate and your blood pressure rise when fear comes in. It's crazy, right? I mean, I can see it in Nicole, like she's got this vein inside her neck. So when we saw that mole, it was like, bah, 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 right? It was like she was scared, right? And so at this point, we have two natural responses to fear. This is called the fight or flight. And this response is triggered by the release of hormones that prepare your body to either stay and deal with the threat or to run away safely. That's called the acute stress response, right? And this is exactly what we're seeing in our fearful world today. And really, I'm going to be honest, social media doesn't help. Let me tell you why social media doesn't help. Have you ever read something and next thing you know, your brain becomes hyper alert, your pupils dilate, You're breathing, like you breathe heavier after you read it. There's been a lot of things that I've read where I start going, right? We either dig our heels in and fight to those that don't believe like we do, or we just run from our calling to help heal this broken world. The fight or flight even takes over in our journey. That's why we're the biggest threat to ourselves. Because we're either going to fight somebody tooth and nail because they don't believe like us, or we're just going to run away from that healing of the broken pieces that we're called to be, to love God and love our neighbors. But I believe that Jesus, as our leader, as our Lord and our Savior, gives us a third option to respond to fear. And it's actually a two-phase to your options, or it's a two-phase to your response. You can either fight it, and I've seen a lot of it, which is, sometimes I get a chuckle out of it. Sometimes my adrenaline gets flowing. Sometimes I just cower under the covers too. Or you can just run from it and just say, I'm turning a blind eye to all this stuff. Or you can live in the calling of this hill journey that you're called to by first straighten up. Jesus says it in verse 28, right? He says, now when these things begin to take place, straighten up. Here's what straighten up means, right? If I'm in a classroom, if I'm a student in a classroom, and a teacher comes in and they said, sit up, what's everybody going to do? Right? Somewhat. Kids are kids these days, but they'll still sit up, right? If a coach comes into the room, says sit up, you're probably going to sit up, right? It's like you're ready for action. So when Jesus uses this term straighten up, what he's saying is, he's not telling you like I tell my kids, just straighten up, act right. Anybody ever said that to kids before? What's wrong with you? Just straighten up and act right. That's not what Jesus is telling us. He's not just saying do what I tell you to do. Or what Jesus is saying is straighten up. Don't look at the chaos, right? You're ready for action here. Get back to your calling. Don't fight everybody. Just get back to your calling. Love the village that God has put you in. Show them what peace looks like in all this crazy time. Don't be an instrument of the chaos. Be an instrument of love and peace. And then the second thing is lift your heads. So Jesus says, don't fight, don't cower, straighten up, lift your heads, and look at the redemption. Look for redemption. Not only just look for his redemption coming, look how you can redeem this broken world as well. You might say, well, how can I redeem this broken world as well? Live your redeemed life. Show people what that looks like. Show people what it looks like to have faith instead of fear. Show people what it looks like to have peace instead of chaos. Show people what it looks like to do those things. And if you don't know how to do those things, get within a community that will help you out with that. You know, we like to call them village crossings, but whatever you want to do, get with some people and talk about life. You can come up here every Sunday and I can tell you a 5-point, unbelievably hermeneutically sound sermon, which I'll let you know what hermeneutics are. I'm not very good at hermeneutics. Or you can just sit down with somebody that's close to you and say, I'm scared to death. Or, man, I messed up today. Or, hey, I need to do this. And then that person in loving kindness will say, you know what? I do too. John 16:33 says this, and this is probably becoming quickly my favorite verse in the Bible. I've said these things to you that you may have peace. In the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world. That's what it means to straighten up and lift your heads. It's to lean onto the promise that Jesus said, take heart, I have overcome the world. Follow me. Follow the one that has overcome the world. Follow the one that is the Savior and the Lord and the one that's coming back one day to heal all these pieces. Now, I know you're probably saying, hey, Eric, that's a great message this morning. I hope you say that. If you do, just tell Nicole, and then she can tell me later, and I'm just playing. But Eric, you don't understand. This, and this is going on in my life. I may not understand your own personal journeys, but I can tell you right now that I don't look at that a lot. I don't look at the fact that I know that I'm going to school in 3 weeks, and I don't know if I have a classroom to go to. I know that sounds funny, but that freaks me out a little bit, right? I don't know every day that I go to middle school practice that I may get a call and say, hey, you're not practicing anymore, right? Or I don't know if I'm ever going to get a call like we did 14 years ago. And you guys, if you have social media, you can look what happened 14 years ago to my sister-in-law, Amber, and her husband's here this morning, and Nicole back there. Their father passed away unexpectedly 14 years ago. I never know if I'm ever going to get that call again, so my brain just races. It may not be the problems that you're dealing with, but I'm going to tell you, and I say this a lot, and I say it to teenagers a lot, hey, problems are relative to your life. None are bigger, none are smaller. They're relative to what you're living. And you still have the same response when the fear kicks in. Your pupils dilate, your breathing gets heavy. For some of us, we'll look and we have the friends that are dealing with a diagnosis that isn't good. But yet that's no different than in my life, that if something happens and to one of my kids, or if they break a leg, or Lily cut her foot this morning out here on a door, the same response, right? It's just relative to who we are. And those moments and all those, even those little things, don't ever let anybody tell you that they're meaningless, because they're not. They're relative to you, but Jesus says, hey, listen, you're going to have these problems. You're going to have these things. You're going to have where people and chaos just engulf you. But don't get caught in that chaos. Look up and take heart, because I've overcome the world. And the way this ends in verse 28, right? Now, when these things take place, straighten up, look up, because your redemption is drawing near. Your redemption. The redemption of all is drawing near. So let us live a redeemed life in this broken world. But let us respond the way Jesus has told us to. Let us be ready to show redemption, the redemption we have, by looking at his redemptive return. So I'm going to ask the ladies to come back up. And as I get ready to end here, you know, I talked a little bit earlier about those gift cards, right? And how those gift cards aren't really good until you cash them in. You know, that's Nicole's favorite activity, is when we're like, hey, let's go out to eat. And she likes to go through her purse and be like, hey, look at our gift cards, right? It's like, hey, yes, winner, right? The kids will both eat that. Let's go eat here, right? Here's the first question I'm going to ask you this morning. It's simply this. Have you decided to cash in this redemption by following Jesus? There's a lot of preachers that will say this exact thing that I'm getting ready to say. It's not going to be up there, so I don't know why I'm pointing up here. It just made me look cool, right? But if Jesus came and lived the perfect life, died the death that I was supposed to, and rose again to give me a new life just for me, or just for one lost person, then it was worth it, right? But he did it for everybody that's ever lived, that is living now, or will ever live. But here's the thing. You don't get that redemption unless you cash in on it. Unless you say, you know, I'm going to follow Jesus. Because one day when he comes riding on the cloud, you may not look like that. That might not be that special moment for you. It might be that moment where you just go, oh my gosh, who is that? And that's why I always say, hey, Jesus did all that, and our natural response is just to follow or not. And if you choose not to follow, you're choosing not to live a redemptive life, a redeemed life. You're not cashing in that gift card, just sitting there wasting, right? And you might say, well, one day I'll just cash it in. We don't know when that one day is. We don't know when he's going to come riding down on the clouds. And that's not to scare anybody at home or in this room. I'm just saying Jesus is coming back. We don't know when he's coming back, but the coming that he's coming back with is not just that, hey, take us back to heaven, we get our reward. He's coming back to make this world the way it's supposed to be. So have you decided to cash in this redemption by following Jesus? If you haven't, why not a better time than today? Why not to say, you know what, I'm going to follow Jesus. Now that may look different than what you think it is. It's not a set of rules that I got to follow now, because I was talking last week with Matt, and I talked about it last week as well, when he's wiped out all that stuff. He literally says, love God and love other people. I took care of the hard part. Jesus took care of all those other commandments himself. He followed all of them. And he says, when you follow me, all I'm going to ask you to do, since he paid that price, all I'm going to ask you to do is love God and love other people. We like to complicate that a little bit. But that's all he's asking you to do as a follower. Look it up. Hey, Jesus, what's the greatest commandment? Love the Lord God with all your heart. And the second is just like the first. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. That's what it means to follow Jesus, is to look for opportunities to be redemption to this world. And so my second question is this: what is your greatest fear? I told you a little lie, a little preacher story at the beginning, that my greatest fear was alligators, because I want to tell you something. My greatest fear is not mattering. I want to matter, right? I want people to know who I am. I want to be a good father. I don't want one day my kids just not want to come around. So that's my greatest fear. And so what will happen? So the second part of that question is simply this: how are you responding to your greatest fear? So for me, my greatest fear, if my greatest fear really is not mattering, how do you think I'm going to respond? There's days that I'm going to feel like I'm going to put myself as the center of attention in every room, where I've always got to butt in when somebody's talking about something. Right? That's me, the fight or flight, right? I'm the fight guy. Right? I'm the guy that got the shovel and dealt with the mole. I'm not going to put any more imagery in your head. I'm the guy that when I'm dealing with my fear, I'm probably going to say something stupid and lose a friendship forever. Whatever your biggest fear is, if you don't look for ways that God will lead you through it, then you're just going to constantly keep redoing the same thing. You're either going to run from it or you're going to keep fighting. Until one day you just say, you know what? I said I'm going to follow you. Let me follow you. And just let it go. I know, pretty easy to say, hard to do. So as I pray, will you stand with us? Father, this morning, as the song says, not only are we no longer a slave, Lord, let us not live like it anymore. Let us not find ways to put the shackles back together that you broke. Let us learn to straighten up and look up when fear comes. I thank you for the peace that you give in the craziness. I thank you for the community of people that wrap around us when life is out of control. And I thank you for the redemption that's coming. Make us whole. Make us like you. We ask this in your Son, Jesus Christ's name. Amen.
Chosen me, love has called my name. I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins. I'm no longer a slave to fear. Child of God, I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child of God. I'm no longer a slave to fear. I am a child.
Join us this week. Thank you for at home. Remember, for everybody here today, even if you don't love this village, you can still get an I Love This Village shirt. Remember, if you could go out the back door, you can go in this way here. It goes from left to right, small, medium, large, and both styles of shirts are on the same chair. So grab you one. It's a gift from us to you. If you're at home right now and you're like, hey, I want one of those shirts, just shoot us a message through social media. Give us your address. And I won't creep at your house, but I will give you a shirt, all right? If you see me, you can say hi. I won't be looking in your windows, I promise, all right? So just let us know. Also, remember, if you have a kid that would like to come to the painting on next Sunday, go to our event and just say, hey, we'd like to come so we know we have a number. And we'll see you guys next week.